Welcome to Calico Cali Designs. Today's tutorial is our In the Hoop dog bone toys. There's 7 embroidery designs in this collection for $9.95. If you are a dog lover like me or know someone that is, you are going to love our newest set of embroidery designs. These are our In the Hoop doggy bone toys. There's 7 designs in all for $9.95, available on our website. And here are the designs. There is a plain one without any words at all. We have dog, woof, 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 fetch, love, this is my favorite, 3 paws, and of course 3 tennis balls. These are really easy to stitch out super fast. We're going to show you how to do that next. And basically you stitch them all out. When you're done, you would wash off your water soluble stabilizer, which I haven't quite gotten to yet. Then you would just fill this with stuffing, poly filling, even old pieces of batting, whatever you want to fill it with. A squeaker if you'd like. Sew the opening closed, and then they're ready for your dog to play with. They also make great gifts, especially if you know someone that just got a puppy. So let's head on over to the machine and I will show you how to make these. The first thing you're going to do is load your design onto your machine. I have mine pulled up here, as you can see. This design fits in a 7x12 hoop. You can use a bigger hoop if that's what you have. And you can see it shows out here all the different colors. So the very first one says electric blue. You can obviously use whatever color you want. That's going to be our placement stitch. And then we'll go on to what says fuchsia, but you don't have to use fuchsia. You can stick with the same color thread. Those 2 different colors are just there so that the machine will stop in between each stitching. And then we'll go into the brown for the love words and pink for the cute little paw, and then last, whatever color you'd like to use for the outline. So let's get started. You're going to hoop a piece of cutaway stabilizer. I like to use cutaway stabilizer for this project because it makes the toy extra durable. So the first color, as I mentioned, says blue. I'm actually going to use a brown just so that you can see it better in the video. You can use any color that you want. I generally match the color to the fabric, but this is just our placement stitch so you can see where to place the fabric. That first stitch is done. You can see all the way around. And again, that's our placement stitch. So now we're going to cut a piece of fabric that's going to cover that entire stitch. Let's talk about fabric choices real quick. Minky comes out so cute on these, especially if you can get a textured one like this. I use fleece on these a lot, especially I like this one here because it looks like a professional dog toy. You could use denim, you could use regular cotton, whatever you like, whatever you have in your studio, it's up to you. It's your toy, whatever your dog likes to chew on. Some dogs chew more aggressively than others. You might want to try a denim. So that's up to you. So pick a fabric choice that you'd like to use, and then you're going to cut it so that it fits in your 7x12 hoop. So I like to just pre-cut them at the 7x12 size so they're ready to go. You will need 2 of these, one for the top and one for the bottom. Now that our placement stitch is done, choose whatever type of fabric you'd like. I personally like fleece for these. You could also do minky, cotton, denim, whichever you like. You'll want to cut it so that it's 7 inches wide, 12 inches deep. Basically, it just needs to cover that entire placement stitch. So you can cut it a little bigger if you want. In fact, bigger sometimes works easier in my opinion. And we're just going to smooth it out here, make sure none of our edges are over the stitching area. And we're going to go ahead and stitch the next color, which on the screen says pink. I'm going to keep this brown in here for video purposes so that you can see it. In real life, I would use a color that blends in perfectly. And this is just going to stitch the fleece to the stabilizer. This stitch is done, and so now we're going to stitch out the words. Because I'm using a fleece fabric, I am going to have to use a water-soluble stabilizer on top of this, otherwise the stitches are going to sink in and you won't see them. So today we're going to stitch out the one that's love, because that's my favorite toy, because I love love. But if you were going to do the plain one, you would just skip this step and go on to the next step. So for right now, I'm going to cut my water-soluble stabilizer. I've placed down my water-soluble stabilizer. One thing that I will often do is just use a piece of painter's tape at the top and the bottom to hold it in place instead of pins. I just don't want it to get folded over during the stitching. So now we're going to go ahead and start the machine and start stitching out the words love. And then we'll come back once this is done stitching. The whole thing thing takes about 30 minutes for this particular design. Each doggy toy takes about 30 to 34 minutes to stitch out, with the exception being the plain one because you're not stitching any words. I just finished stitching out the brown letters for love, and now we're going to stitch out the paw. I'm going to go with a pink color thread. You can of course use any color that you like, but I'm a little partial to pink. So I'm going to stitch that out and then we'll come back. So my word love has finished stitching. The next step will be to put your back fabric on here, right side down, wrong side up, and it's going to stitch it out and connect all the layers. However, here's a little tip. Before I do that, I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine, not unhoop the project, just remove the hoop from the machine, and I'm going to trim back this water-soluble stabilizer. I just find it makes it a little bit easier for me to remove it later on. You don't have to do that. You can leave it in place and just go on to the next step, but I'm personally going to take a moment to just really quickly kind of trim that back. The final step now for stitching this out is to put our backing fabric on here. We're going to put it right side down, and you want to make sure that it's covering up all of these other stitch lines. So I've cut a piece that is 7 by 12. Also going to make sure that none of these underneath have folded over. That's gotten me a couple of times. So just like so. If you want, you could pin it in place or even use the painter's tape trick again to keep it in place. I think I've got it good, so we're just going to go ahead and stitch this out. This final stitch is going to stitch all the layers together. It's going to go around 4 times. Now the embroidery is all finished. We can remove the hoop from the machine, unhoop this, and carry on to the next steps. We've removed our project from the hoop, so the next step is to cut away all of the extra fabric outside of the stitching line and stabilizer as well. So here's a little tip. This is where we're going to obviously turn it inside out, and later on we'll close up this by hand sewing it. So what I like to do when I'm trimming this is just to kind of give myself a little bit of extra fabric around there and not trim it too close. Everything else I'll trim it about 1/4 inch. That way if I want to kind of tuck this in when I hand sew that open and close later, I have the space to do so. Now that I've trimmed this away, the next step will be to turn it inside out. But before we do that, I like to take a little pair of scissors and just come in here at the corners and trim just a little slit there, as you can see, being careful not to cut any of the stitching lines. And I do that around all of the corners here and round edges. I just think it makes it a little bit easier to turn inside out. So I'm going to clip them all and then we'll turn it inside out. I've clipped all of my corners and around the edges here. So now we're just going to turn this inside out, or right side out rather. And here is a little trick for you. I like using this little tool here. This is by Annie.com, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just really like it. It works really good for getting into those corners with this little wooden end here and pushing them out all the way. The other end of the tool is a stiletto, which I use when sewing. I'll turn right side out. So now you'll want to remove your water-soluble stabilizer. Just go wash it off in the sink, let it dry. Definitely be sure to remove that before you give this to your dogs to play with. And as always, definitely supervise your dogs when playing with any toy anyhow. So we're going to remove that and then we will stuff it with some filling. Here's my trick for a little bit easier removal of water-soluble stabilizer. I put a cooling rack in my sink. Place this on top, and that's going to kind of keep it in place, and we'll just go ahead and put the water on, and look at that, it's already dissolving away. You can use your fingers a bit if you need to help it on out there, kind of smush it around, but I find it definitely makes it easier to have it laying on the cooling rack. Then the water drips through right away. This makes the whole thing faster. So we're going to continue on with this and we'll be back when it's done. So here's one that I've already previously removed the water-soluble stabilizer. I have stuffed it. I opted not to go with a squeaker for this one. So the opening closed and voila, it is all done. I hope that your dogs love these toys just as much as mine do. Thanks for watching, everyone.